This anime begins as a man named Kenichi overworks himself until he ends up in the hospital. To protect his heart, Kenichi switches to a more tranquil life in the wilderness, where he tends to some crops and plays with some crows. He also watches some isekai anime while doing some writing. One day, while trying to order some ingredients, Kenichi disappears and finds himself in a strange place. He finds a corpse nearby, which makes him wonder if he's in some fantasy world, and he decides to try what he saw in those isekai anime. He calls out for his status screen to open, and it shockingly works. Kenichi can't believe that it actually appeared, and it confirms that he's in another world. Oddly, his status screen doesn't display his health or magic points. It doesn't show any skills either, and it only displays something called Shangri-La. Clicking on it reveals that it's the major online shopping site that he used to use all the time in his old world. The only other thing on his status screen is his item box. Kenichi gives it a test by storing some weeds, and finds that it's also pretty easy to remove stuff. Just then, our hero's stomach grumbles, so he tries to get some food from Shangri-La. Unfortunately, his status screen instructs him to insert money, but Kenichi doesn't have any. Our intelligent protagonist comes up with an idea, and is delighted to find that he can trade stuff in from his item box. Misfortune strikes again, however, as the weeds he picked obviously aren't worth anything. Kenichi desperately needs something of value, and he spots the sword sticking out of the corpse. Kenichi trades the sword in for almost 100,000 yen and finally gets some food. He then buries the corpse and thanks it for helping. Afterwards, we see that Kenichi has purchased a bike and some boots through his online shop. The compass he also purchased guides him, as he needs to find a settlement so he can earn some money. While taking a break and making some food using all the stuff he bought, Kenichi comes up with an idea. He will use the money he's made to order things, then sell them in this world for even more money. Kenichi feasts on his delicious meal, but he is horrified when some terrifying monsters emerge from the forest. He desperately searches for some weapons on Shangri-La, but the monsters are quickly approaching. All he finds is a bow, but he doesn't know how to use one. He settles on buying some fireworks instead, but it only buys him a little bit of time. Kenichi buys a slingshot just in time, and it works perfectly. He actually manages to take out some of the beasts so he doesn't let up and keeps attacking. Eventually the wolves just run away, and so does Kenichi. The headlamp he purchased helps guide him in the dark, and he gets as far away as he can. The next day, Kenichi's relieved to see a city in the distance. As he makes his way there, he runs into a merchant named Fuyu. Kenichi accepts his offer to take him to the city, and he introduces himself to the other passenger. Kenichi explains that he's planning to do business in the city, but Fuyu wonders why he isn't carrying any equipment. He realizes that Kenichi must be one of those special people with an item box, and the other passenger shows off hers by pulling out an instrument. She sings a song about their little journey, and says that it's time for Kenichi's story to finally begin. In the city, Kenichi thanks Fuyu for the ride by giving him some pepper. Fuyu is amazed, but horrified at the same time, and he wonders if this is what Kenichi plans to sell in the city. He explains that this would be very dangerous because there is a spice syndicate in the city. They are called Bacopa, and they have a monopoly in all the spices. Fuyu loosens up a bit and offers to pay for the pepper, but it was intended to be a gift. Fuyu is a proud merchant, however, so he insists and Kenichi makes his first sale. After Fuyu leaves, Kenichi does some quick calculations, and he's amazed by how much pepper sells for. That night, Kenichi heads to a restaurant where he is greeted by the receptionist. This place is also an inn, so Kenichi pays 1 silver for a room. The girl tells him to sign his name, but Kenichi realizes that he has no clue how to write in this world. The receptionist wonders why he's dressed so strangely, and Kenichi explains that it has to do with his business. Unfortunately, he is told that the Merchants Guild won't register anyone if they can't read, write, or calculate numbers. Kenichi clarifies that he isn't some idiot, it's just that he doesn't know the writing of this nation. The girl gives him a quick test to see if he can do math, and she's amazed when Kenichi aces it. Reading and writing is still an issue though, so she teaches him how to write his name. The girl introduces herself as Azalea, and Kenichi asks if she could teach him how to read and write in this country's language. Kenichi sweetens this deal by offering to give her candy from another country, and she is sold. The candy is absolutely delicious, and Azalea can't believe she gets to eat it. She feels like a noble, but she fears that they might take it away from her if they found out. Her liking the candy is nice and all, but Kenichi asks if she could start teaching him already. After a while, Kenichi realizes that the language isn't too different from the one in his old world. Azalea is impressed by how quickly he has learned, and she assured that Kenichi will be a great merchant. She can see success coming his way, so she says that she might want to be his mistress. Kenichi's quite a bit older than her, however, so he warns her that she should just forget about him. Of course, he only makes it worse by drawing a portrait of her, and Azalea is amazed again. This, along with the candy, makes her feel really special, so Azalea decides that she has to repay Kenichi. The next morning, Kenichi fills out the required paperwork at the Merchants Guild. The registration fee is 1 silver, but Kenichi's wallet has taken a beating, and he's down to 116,000 yen. Luckily, he's allowed to pay in installments, and he is given his guild ID. Outside, Kenichi wanders around the market to study the prices of all the goods. 1 plain plate goes for a small square silver, which is roughly 5,000 yen. 2 sheets of slightly brown paper go for 1 copper, which is around 1,000 yen. He spots some knives and takes note of their price as well. Kenichi then buys a mixed bag of fruit from Chiquita Banana, but he has never seen fruit like them before. His item box displays their names, but he still has no clue. Luckily, Azalea has heard of them and she loves them. In his room, Kenichi tries to think of what his goal should be, but he ends up passing out. The next day, Kenichi uses a bunch of supplies he bought, including a hammer, to build himself a stand. Azalea is amazed by the style of clothespin he's using, because the ones she uses are flimsy and they always break. His are much better, and Kenichi is surprised when she says they could be very valuable. A while later, Kenichi shocks some poor old lady. When he summons his stand next to her, he gets everything prepared and the lady ends up buying 5 clothespins for 1 copper. Her name is Anama and she welcomes him to the area. After a few hours pass, Anama points out that his clothespins are selling like hotcakes. Anama's sales have picked up just by being near Kenichi, so she hopes that he never leaves. Kenichi's glad that his pins have been so profitable, but he's a savvy businessman and he knows that imitators will eventually start selling something similar. Just then, some kid shows up and Kenichi can instantly tell that he's someone of high status. The guy takes a look at one of Kenichi's knives, and Kenichi shows him how easily it can cut through stuff. It costs 2 silver, which is quite expensive, but the guy has never seen such a pristine blade, and he is interested. The knife is a little too small for him, however, so he wonders if Kenichi has anything bigger. Kenichi searches his item shop, but it's going to be hard to find anything, because of certain laws. Luckily, he manages to find his sword, and the guy is amazed by its beauty. Comes with a heavy price tag, however, as it costs 1 gold, but the guy really wants it. He struggles with his own impulses, and Kenichi wonders if he asks for too much. This guy is clearly a big spender though, so Kenichi knew he had to make the best of it. Just then some little cat person starts sniffing around, and some other cat people scold her for going overboard. This is Kenichi's first time seeing beast folk, so he apologizes for his reaction, and one of the cats jumps onto Kenichi's stand as he wants to buy his roof. Kenichi says it's not for sale, but he remembers that he can always buy more. The guy wants to buy 3 of them, so our boy gives him a juicy discount. He shaves off 1 copper from the total, but the cats don't have copper. They don't even seem to know math, but our boy Kenichi does, and he works it out. The cats don't trust him, but the blonde guy vouches for Kenichi as his calculations were impeccable. With that sale done, the blonde guy says that he's ready to buy the sword. That night, Kenichi uses his earnings to pay for 5 whole nights at the inn. Elsewhere, some nobles amazed by the clothespins that her maid bought. Just then she gets the idea to sell them at her company. She refuses to let this opportunity pass her by, so she goes to find her father. Back with our boy, he prepares to take a bath in some little tub thing he bought. On Shangri-La, he finds that they have drum baths, and he thinks about filling it up with water and heating it over a fire. After all this buying he has been doing, Kenichi begins to wonder how the online shop even works. The light from the screen doesn't illuminate his surroundings, and he has no clue how the packages even get to him. He begins to fear that there might be some kind of scam that will eventually demand his soul as payment for its use. It's too much to figure out, so our boy just gives up. Elsewhere, we see some girl be down on a pigeon so she can have something to eat. Just then, the girl is startled as someone calls out to her, and she begs God for her not to be found. A while later, Kenichi sets his shop up with some jewelry. They aren't diamonds or anything, but he figures that zirconium should still be pretty valuable in this world. Anama is amazed that he always has such good items, and she wonders who his supplier is. Of course, Kenichi doesn't tell her about his secret store, so he just tells her that it's a trade secret. Just then, the maid, who bought the clothespins before, returns to his shop. She wants more, but Kenichi is shocked when she requests to buy 100 of them. That will cost the whole 20 copper or 4 silver, but this maid is packing tons of cash. While he gets the order ready, a necklace he is selling catches the maid's eye. It's made of zirconium, and they made a surprise that it only costs 6 small silver. She can't buy it right now, so Kenichi offers to put it on hold for her. After a long day, Kenichi closes his shop, but the beast folk return, and he wonders if they want to complain about something. It's actually the opposite, as they beg him to sell them some of his spices. Kenichi didn't have any for sale, but Miley was able to smell spices all over him. Anama comes to his aid as she reminds the cats that things could go badly for him if he gets the attention of the spice syndicate called Bacopa. The cats desperately beg for some spices, but it ends up drawing a crowd and they start whispering. Spices are used to make the beast folk soul food, but everyone knows that there's no way that a new guy can oppose the Bacopa. Just then, Kenichi comes up with an idea. He can't sell it to them, but he thinks it should be fine to cook them some food with the spices. The cat people celebrate and Kenichi says that they can eat by the river. The cats drag them away, and our boy prepares to go out. Gordon Ramsay, after buying a bunch of cooking supplies from Shangri-La, Anama is there to help, so he has her chop up some vegetables. Anama doesn't recognize these strange vegetables like carrots, so Kenichi explains that they are from a foreign land. Anama then gets to chopping and Kenichi prepares the fish. He uses several spices that he purchased from his secret store, including curry powder and oyster sauce. Miley helps out as well, and the other beast folk can't wait to eat. Of course, ends up being delicious, and it's the greatest thing they have ever tasted. It's so good that it's almost unbelievable. That isn't the only thing that's odd, as Anama noticed that they are eating with silver spoons like the nobles do. In reality though, Kenichi knows that they're just made of stainless steel. The degenerate cats then think that the only thing that could make this meal even better is some booze. Anama scolds them for being so out of control, but Kenichi is totally on board. He bought some booze from his shop while they weren't looking, and he offers it to them in exchange for keeping their little meal a secret. The cats start getting hammered, and Anama says that Kenichi is too kind. Everyone formally introduces themselves, and the cats jump into the river for a swim. Kenichi then summons soap so Miley can wash herself and a towel to dry her. He also buys some blankets so everyone can sleep outside. The next morning, Kenichi explains to Azalea that he didn't return to the inn last night because he was hanging out with the beast folk. Azalea boldly reminds him that he could have been fooling around with her instead of some beast woman, and he points out that they were just his buddies. The cat fur she finds all over his shirt says different, so she just leaves. As Kenichi sets up his shop, he wonders if Azalea hates him now. He quickly gets over it however, because the slow peaceful life he's aiming for doesn't need women in it. Just then, we see that the maid has brought the noble to the source of the clothespins. Kenichi completely forgets that peaceful world without women, as he can't help but stare at the noble. Margaret pays for the necklace he was holding for her, and the girl is amazed by the quality. She can't believe that his jewelry doesn't have real diamonds, as they look just like the real thing. Kenichi explains that it's polished glass, and the girl pleads for him to show her anything else he might have. The girl is then stunned when Kenichi uses his item box to reveal more jewelry. In reality, Kenichi is getting all this from his secret store, but he knows that he can never tell anyone about it. The girl introduces herself as Primula, the daughter of the owner of the Mallow Trading Company. She has a request for Kenichi and asks him to come to her company, so he can meet her father. Anama recognizes her and explains that her father has a good reputation, and he is very well liked. The company is a major trader in this country, and Kenichi thinks about how a connection with a major company could be beneficial. On their way, the maid shows him some clothespins. Primula is a bit ashamed as she admits that she tried to have a craftsman replicate the clothespins that they bought from Kenichi. It was a complete failure however, as he could not make the metal part properly. Kenichi explains that the design looks fairly simple, but he has heard that it takes advanced technology to make. Just then, they arrive at the giant building, but Primula says that it's pretty small compared to the house of a noble. Inside, Primula's father Mallow introduces himself. Kenichi introduces himself back, and Mallow is impressed by his politeness. They get right to business, as Mallow admires all the amazing pieces of jewelry that Kenichi has brought. He is then shocked when Primula informs him that Kenichi has an item box. Mallow has one as well, and he explains that he used his to grow his trading company to the size it is now. That proves just how powerful having an item box can be, but Kenichi explains that for now, he's just using his as a storehouse for his crops. They all have good laugh at the wasted potential, but it's time to get serious. Mallow reveals that he would like for Kenichi to become a supplier for the Mallow Trading Company. Kenichi's pretty business savvy, so he knows that Mallow has the connections to find the right market for all his things. He has a huge network, so they will be able to make the most profit possible. Kenichi wonders why they didn't just buy it from his shop and sell it without him knowing, but Mallow has a lot more honor than that as a businessman. He knew that Kenichi would feel terrible if he ever found out. On top of that, there was also the chance that Mallow's rivals would approach him first. Mallow wouldn't have been able to forgive himself if one of those rivals signed Kenichi to an exclusivity contract. Mallow's trading company has several secrets to success in making profits, and he explains one of them. He says that someone shouldn't be blinded by the profits in front of them, because they might let an opportunity for even greater business dealings pass them by. Now it's time for the offer, so he has to buy Kenichi's stuff for 50% of the retail price. Mallow fears that he might be asking for too much, but Kenichi already agreed the second he made the offer. It's a pretty great deal, so the guys shake on it. Kenichi thinks about how he's making tens of thousands in profit on things he can buy for 2 or 3 grand, so it's a win-win for everyone. After Kenichi signs the contract, he immediately starts supplying items. The first few products he supplies them with earned him well over 1 million yen. Primula is very impressed with the new pieces of jewelry, and she offers to pay 10 gold for them. 10 gold equates to roughly 2 million yen in his old world, so this offer stuns our boy. His silence makes Primula wonder if he wants more, but he isn't greedy and he takes the offer. Before Kenichi knew it, his balance on Shangri-La had passed 8 digits, and he could finally afford something that he has been eyeing. Now that he has money, Kenichi can finally get started on his plan to lead a slow life. He then leaves the city to find a nice area to set up base. Just then, a flashback shows that Azalea was stunned to hear that Kenichi wanted to live in the woods. It's pretty dangerous out there, but Kenichi says that he won't be too far from the city walls. Kenichi then buys some landscaping equipment to clear the area for his base. The weed cutter is extremely useful, but he has to keep buying fuel for it. After hours of work and several energy drinks, Kenichi finishes making himself a road with some gravel he bought. With the help of a gas-powered chainsaw, Kenichi then began cutting down trees. It's not the easiest process, especially for the larger trees, but Shangri-La has all the supplies he needs to get the job done. He buys a lodging wedge and a sledgehammer, and it allows him to take down the giant trees. After days of cutting, it's time to get rid of the mess. Kenichi tries to put it in his storage, but it doesn't work for some reason. He assumes that they're too big, so he cuts them down and it works. Turns out the only items under 10 meters long will fit in his item box. Luckily for him, most things are under that size. The next day, it's time to get rid of the tree stumps, but it's exhausting work. Kenichi gets frustrated after just trying to do one, and he gets overwhelmed by all the manual labor. Kenichi's done playing around, so he decides to buy a backhoe. This behemoth cost him 1.2 million yen, and Kenichi panics because he just made a huge impulse buy out of frustration. This thing has definitely been used, and it even has a little rust on it, but at least this way Kenichi won't pass out from exhaustion. He tries to start it up, but this thing runs on diesel and Shangri-La doesn't sell that. Kerosene could work, but they don't have that either. Kenichi refuses to give up, especially after making such a huge purchase. Shangri-La does have lamp oil, which could be used as a substitute for kerosene, but it costs 1800 yen per liter. It will be super expensive, but Kenichi doesn't have any other options. Things could get bad if it doesn't work, so Kenichi decides to buy a diesel generator to test it on first. Kenichi loads up the generator and is relieved to see that the fuel actually powers it. He then uses the generator to power some light study. Kenichi takes a break to have a bath, but the bugs are a real problem. Thankfully, Azalea informed him about a bug-repelling magic stone. Kenichi goes to find some the next day, and is surprised to find that a mage owns the shop. The mage can tell that Kenichi is a foreigner and he offers to pay him handsomely if he has any interesting items. Kenichi explains that he's not here to sell, he's here to buy, and the mage says that the bug-repelling magic stones are 3 silver. That's kind of expensive, so Kenichi tries an exchange instead. He offers the mage some fruit, and the mage has never seen oranges before. They look good though, so he knocks the price down a bit and the deal is done. Later, Anama reveals that the mage has knowledge of all sorts of things, and Kenichi would not regret being his friend. Kenichi wonders who the guy is on the wanted poster because he keeps appearing, so Anama reveals that his name is Shaga. He is the leader of the bandits in this area. In the forest, we see that the mysterious girl was just sold, and she joins a group of other soul children. As they are transported, their carriage gets taken down by Shaga and his bandits. The next morning, we see that Kenichi has got in the hand of working the backhoe. He's super into it too as he knocks around the tree stumps. Kenichi has a blast and declares the operating heavy machinery is the funniest thing ever. He wants to dig holes everywhere, but he actually needs to flatten the land if he wants a solid foundation for a building. For the sake of his slow life in another world, Kenichi declares that he will build a log cabin right where he stands. Later, Kenichi brings some sugar to sell to Mello. Mello explains that sugar and salt are very precious, but the nation has exclusive rights to them, so they can't buy them from Kenichi. This is pretty unfortunate for our boy, as he thought that he would make a great profit from them. However, Mello reveals that Kenichi's jewelry was a big hit. Mello would like to see more, so Kenichi amazes them with his latest product. With those sold, Kenichi banks another 3 million yen worth of gold and silver. With this new wealth, Kenichi is finally able to afford a log cabin. He's getting a great deal on the house, but he is shocked when his order comes in. It turns out that it doesn't come assembled, and Kenichi will have to do it all himself. It's unfortunate, but it does explain why it was so cheap. There's no going back now, so Kenichi must begin assembling. Luckily, the build is pretty simple as he only needs to put together planks. The beast folk come by and help him out, as a repayment for treating them earlier. Meanwhile, Kenichi kept working at his stall and several weeks passed. Kenichi purchased a grill to keep the beast folk fed and a one-man tent so he could camp out by his house. All in all, it took just under a month for his new home to be built. Kenichi had the beast folk to thank for that, and they all celebrated at the end. Kenichi of course made several purchases like a bed and some blankets, so he could get a good night's rest. He still needs to do something about getting electricity, and he thinks about painting the walls and the roof. There was a ton of other stuff too, and that all took a month to get done. He made a nice garden with a fence, and set his bathroom up to recycle waste as fertilizer. The toilet cost him over 200,000 yen, and he paid 30,000 for a kitchen sink. As for electricity, Kenichi set up 20 solar panels attached to a battery, and the entire set cost him almost 400,000 yen. Perhaps his best purchase, however, is the drum bath he bought for 25,000. He had to use gasoline tanks to get water from the river, but it's his first real bath since coming to this world, and it was well worth it. This is the height of slow living for Kenichi. He declares that his slow life in another world, as the ruler of his own domain, has finally begun. Later, Kenichi thanks Azalea as he won't be staying at the inn anymore, but she thinks that she's the one that should be thanking him. After waking up the next morning, Kenichi heads off to take some pictures of the wilderness with the camera that he bought. Kenichi couldn't be happier with his slow and wonderful life, but all that comes crashing down. He sets off a trap and Kenichi soon finds himself dodging arrows. He's being attacked by beast folk, who have taken notice of him living in the forest. The beast folk talk about killing Kenichi, and this makes him realize what kind of world this actually is. He goes on the offensive Rambo style, and fires off several shots from his slingshot. He scares the beast folk with some fireworks and then terrifies them with his backhoe. After scaring them away, Kenichi finds an injured cat. It was hit by one of their arrows and it doesn't let Kenichi get close. Kenichi would like to help, but the cat could be dangerous. To solve this, Kenichi buys some floor cushions and a neck guard as protection. Kenichi manages to remove the arrow and he buys some stuff to disinfect the wound. Some antibiotics will keep the wound from getting infected, and Kenichi even buys some painkillers to help the cat with the pain. Kenichi isn't sure if it will survive like this, so he tries to put it into his item box, but of course it doesn't work. In the end, he just brought it home with him, where he even bought it a pet blanket. Unfortunately, it hasn't moved at all, so Kenichi wonders if it won't live. He goes to see the old mage to ask if he knows how to heal a cat, but the old man says Kenichi will make some good money from the cat's hide. Anama can't help either, but Miley has some information. She explains that bobcats are considered messengers of the gods, so she would like to see it. Kenichi is glad to see that the cat has been eating, and Miley can tell that the dogmen were the ones responsible for the arrow. Kenichi has to keep the cat from licking its wound, so he buys it a collar. Miley admires Kenichi for being so kind, so she decides to thank him on the cat's behalf. To do this, she hunts down some birds and Kenichi cooks them on a portable grill that he bought. After some seasoning, Miley gives it a try and she's amazed by the flavor. She would like to stay the night so she can keep an eye on the bobcat, and she doesn't even mind that Kenichi only has one bed. Days later, we see that the cat is recovering nicely, so Kenichi begins farming. He bought some plants and fertilizer from Shangri-La, but of course he will need some water. Going to the river every time would be a pain, so Kenichi considers making a well. That night Kenichi has a strange dream and the bobcat wakes him up. It seems to be feeling better and it even wants to go outside. It rushes off immediately and Kenichi tells it to have a good life. He then took a few days from working his stall and began working on the well. He had to buy an earth drill and then the electric well pump. 1 week and 50,000 yen later Kenichi had running water. Primula arrives after not seeing him at his stall, and she explains that Miley told her where he lives. Primula is surprised to see everything he has built, and curious about what that giant metal thing is behind his house. Kenichi has an easy explanation and reveals that it's his loyal servant. He calls it his familiar, and this makes Primula think that he can use magic. Kenichi says that he can and asks her to keep it a secret. Kenichi points out that the city gate will be closed today, and he assumes that she wants to stay at his place for the night. Primula makes it seem like he's the one suggesting it, and he points out that he only has one bed. Of course she doesn't mind, and she's amazed to learn that Kenichi even has a bath. That night, Primula gets inside, but she gets scared of the dark and asks Kenichi to show his face. He makes sure that everything's okay with the bath, but she refuses to let him leave. He says that she can take a bath when it's not dark out, but she refuses to let an opportunity pass her by. Kenichi reminds her that he could be an evil person since they don't know each other that well, but she has heard about all the nice things Kenichi has done for Miley. Later that night, Kenichi buys her a bathrobe and she thinks they should sell it. It isn't for sale, but Primula explains that their customers would love it. Kenichi agrees to do a limited sale and Primula is very grateful. Kenichi then buys her an 8,000 yen nightgown and she is amazed by the quality. She even thinks that Kenichi could become the top merchant in the entire kingdom. Kenichi isn't interested in that at all because catching the attention nobles sounds like nothing but trouble. He just wants to earn enough to lead a quiet life and eat good food. Primula understands his concern, so she promises that the Mallow Company will never reveal that he is their supplier. Kenichi then amazes Primula with a drawing of her and they head to bed. In the middle of the night, Primula tries to check if he is awake, but Kenichi pretends to be asleep. Elsewhere, we find that the mysterious girl is being mistreated by the bandits. Shaga is pleased to see the bandits' earnings and he is told that they have received a new job. The next day, Kenichi takes Primula back home and he knows that he will have some explaining to do to her father after she spent the night. Kenichi is surprised, however, when Mallow just thanks him for taking care of his daughter. He was worried and he wonders who she takes after. Kenichi then shows Mallow his bathrobes that are made with great materials. He takes a step further by showing them some lingerie. But Mallow's overwhelmed, and Kenichi says that he was just joking. Just then, the maid comes in with a bunch of documents. Mallow explains that the nation has made changes to its system for keeping ledgers, so he has to rewrite them. This is because someone in the neighboring empire invented a system known as double-entry bookkeeping. This shocks Kenichi because double-entry bookkeeping is something from his old world. Mello explains that the empire has spread rapidly thanks to the inventions of a certain man. Mello then invites Kenichi to come along while he looks over a new prototype product that he just agreed to purchase. Kenichi is then stunned when he sees that this prototype is pitcher pump and Mello is impressed that Kenichi has heard of it. Kenichi's shock is because this pitcher pump is also from his old world. These two things can't be a coincidence, so Kenichi wonders if there's another person from his old world in this one. Kenichi became frustrated after seeing how they were impressed by another inventor, so Kenichi tried to show them a new type of vehicle. This backfired, however, as they laughed at the silly-looking design and they assumed that he was kidding. Primula would then go on to visit Kenichi more often and even spend the night. One night she revealed that she would be going on a business trip and she would be gone for a month. Primula boldly wants to have that see-through piece of clothing, so Kenichi assumes that there's a guy that she wants to impress. Primula confirms it and reveals that he's here right now. Of course, the humble Kenichi says that Primula should have a better sense of self-worth and she shouldn't fall for an old man like him. Primula knows that he's a good man, however, and she explains that her father doesn't even mind her being close to Kenichi. Kenichi decides to just put this whole thing on hold, so Primula asks him to at least sleep in the same bed. Kenichi agrees but can't understand what she sees in an old man like him. The next morning, Primula went back to town and Kenichi was visited by an armored man. It's the guy that bought a sword from him, and he reveals that his name is Paul. Paul is investigating rumors about a strange man living in the forest, and he immediately starts asking questions about Kenichi's stuff. Kenichi explains it away by saying that it's magic-related, and Paul wonders if he's a mage. Kenichi asks him to keep it a secret, and gives Paul a bunch of steel for his silence. Kenichi explains that he doesn't have any more swords, but Paul can take the steel to a blacksmith so he can forge one. Paul is grateful, so he decides to tell Kenichi something interesting that he heard. A mage with a unique spell no one has ever heard of has appeared in the empire. This spell produces a large amount of yellowish dipping sauce, that the person calls mayo something. Kenichi is stunned as Paul confirms that it's called mayonnaise. Paul then reveals that this mage also took down a ferocious dragon. Kenichi can't believe that someone defeated a dragon by using mayonnaise, and he wonders what kind of person ended up reincarnating in the Empire. And with that, we have come to the end of this part. Stay tuned for next part. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell to receive all the latest updates.